must admit, I knew this was going to happen eventually. I didn't know how quick it would. But I've got a couple coming up for you. But this one, the overall title outside the call for special, I love titles. I know you're still in shock that my Monday show, The Guest Show. How did I think of that? But this one, as I said, that's how the tagline is Hear the Truth, is real lives. So I'm going to call these specials real lives. They're always about some issue to do with somebody's real life. And today my guest is somebody, he was originally going to be the first person I got on, because he worked for a homeless charity. I've worked with him several times on other projects. A very knowledgeable person. Not as incredible as me, Ross. Don't get your head too big. Ross Watkins. He works for a charity who have quite a few things. And I must admit, the first thing I heard of this charity, I was totally wrong. Another time I'll bring him on, I want him to talk about who are the homeless. Yeah. But he phoned me up on Friday. And occasionally we do talk, like you've heard Matt down here. I talk to him sometimes about homeless issues. Ross, the same thing. Oops. Oh, God. Sorry. And he phoned me up and talked to me about, I will use the term illegal immigrants who are going to be chucked, and he's going to explain the difference between what we in the public here as legal and illegal. Because as usual, I have a pre-talk with him, a little bit talk so we can plan this. And I've learned so much in the last half hour. I've been speaking to him, and I hope you'll do as well. So first of all, thank you for coming, Ross.
Thank you, Ian.
Now, why don't you start with your story? And this will be more a discussion than a guest show. But you first, Ross. Tell us what the situation is.
Okay, so in April of this year, 2023, I was at a meeting in Brent and I found out that asylum seekers that are in hotels, when they get their refugee status, they'll be given 17 to 14 days to leave their accommodation, which before it used to be 28 days. And it's not much of a time, but it was long enough for a lot of people to actually find accommodation to go into as an alternative. What's happening now is that they're being given 7 days to leave the accommodation, which ends up with quite a lot of them becoming street homeless. And we're looking at something that's going to happen this winter and into spring as well, is we're going to suddenly find thousands of people becoming street homeless on top of the people that are already street homeless. And we're looking at services that can't provide enough accommodation, enough support for people already there without throwing even more people into the mix as well. So it's a situation that is going to affect every single homeless service in the country. It's going to affect every single local authority in the country. And it's not really being discussed about.
Clarify a few things for me, but also for the audience here. Now, I know that at the moment the figures in London have gone up by 29% for street homeless. That was the last report I read, which only about a month ago. Now you're talking about these people, men or women, who are now given. Even I'll say to you now, I was at a meeting a few years ago for the GLA, and all the services were saying that they had 28 days in a shelter. 28 days is not long enough to help them. So what you're saying 28 days is enough. It's not, in my view. And everybody was promoting 56 days. It hasn't been changed. But these people are now, we get in the press, and I want you to clarify this. We have the illegal ones and the legal ones. What's the difference?
So an illegal immigrant is someone who comes into the country and does not declare themselves to authorities or makes a claim for asylum or to regulate their stay in the UK. Okay. And a legal migrant is someone who does declare themselves and does try to regulate their stay in the country.
So we're talking about what would be the legal migrants in these hotels. Am I correct there?
No.
Oh,
So an illegal migrant would not get into a hotel on the whole fact that that any authority does not know about them, so they wouldn't get placed into hotels.
yeah.
So it's not just hotels that are being used, that's the ones that are mostly in the headlines. The people being placed into accommodation are asylum seekers, people that are claiming asylum in this country because they fear persecution in their country of origin. An illegal migrant would not be placed there because they're not known about.
Mm. It's interesting because we had this definitely. I did read. I mentioned it. I saw an article, ladies and gentlemen, a month. I think I said to you before. My day consists of reading articles and trying to decide what I want to. And I'd be doing one every day if I took every single one up. But I did read about a hotel up north. Two hotels being up north, full of migrants, and they were going to be thrown out the street for Christmas.
The language again isn't correct. What it is in the hotels you have asylum seekers, and they are only asked to leave accommodation when they're moved to alternative accommodation, still as an asylum seeker, or they've received their refugee status, which means their stay in the UK has been authorised. They've got indefinite leave to remain or limited leave to remain. So when someone's an asylum seeker, they are housed through the Home Office for the Immigration Department. And as soon as they gain their refugee status, which is it's been seen that they would face persecution in their home country, they get the same rights as most UK nationals. Now, some of them on limited leave to remain and some on indefinite leave to remain will have no access to public funds and no access to social housing, but that's exceedingly rare now. So most people who get their refugee status will have access to benefits, so universal credit, and they'll have access to social housing, which means they can apply for social housing the same as any UK national. What that does mean is that if, for argument's sake, you gain your refugee status and you've been living in a hotel in Stevenage, you can apply for social housing from Stevenage Borough Council. Now, part of the rules applying for Stevenage Borough Council is you need to be living in that local authority area for at least 5 years. The vast majority, I would say nearly all, people that claim that get their refugee status has not been living in that local authority area for 5 years. So even though they're entitled to apply for social housing, they can't actually, in reality, apply for social housing to get on what we call the bidding system. Used to be the General Needs Register. And one of the big misbeliefs out there is as soon as someone gets their refugee status and they can apply for social housing, they suddenly get social housing, which is not true. There's a few cases that have been in the press where recent refugees have gained social housing, but there's very specific cases around that, really specific. And again, we're talking about 99% of people with refugee status actually having that. Very few will ever get it.
Yeah, it's like you see these articles. I've heard people talk about they get these big houses. And I think that's a rare state, but of course, papers advertise that because it looks incredible. One of
the few ways that people can actually get that, and one of the few specifics, if you had a family member who came into this country 6 or 7 years ago, gained refugee status, and was living, argument's sake, in Stevenage Borough for the last 6 or 7 years, and then their family came over and got refugee status. As soon as their family gets refugee status, that person who was the original refugee can then put in a claim, and if the new refugees is his wife and children, they would have access to social housing because the husband who they'd normally live with has been living in the local authority area for the last 5+ years. So there's very rare cases and very specific cases where that would happen.
But that's not unusual. It's like the local connection law. If your parents lived in the area, you've got local connection. You might have been in the area for years.
It's with the local connection one. It's if your parents have lived in that local authority area for the last 5 years and continue to do so, you do have one.
Yeah. But you might not have been there for 10, 20 years, So to me, I disagree with that, as you know, and for ladies, I disagree. Local connection means you've got to be in an area for a certain part of time. Now, I agree with places like, say, St Albans or small little towns, but in London, I would say, ask yourselves, ladies and gentlemen, have you been living in an area for 5 years? I know that in the last 5 years, I've been under 3 different councils. So I'm waiting now. Yeah, I moved into this place in Brent in March. So I'm going to wait 5 years to say, yeah, I'm a Brentian, so to speak, which is a load of rubbish to me. But also it's the housing need, which is another area, really. I'm sliding away. But so for somebody who's of refugee status, there's no way they've lived in a place. Unless they're married to an English person or an English man or woman, then they can start. And I still think I don't agree with it in that one, but it's been used by a lot of people.
That's only relation to social housing. It's so if you was to likely to become homeless again at all, if you was likely to become homeless, you could still apply to Brent Council under the local connection law. You don't have to be there 5 years. You only have to be there 6 months out of 12. It means that you won't be added onto their social needs register unless they think there's a specific reason for them to do so. They can give a discretionary decision on adding you to it, but it is exceedingly rare, and generally it is based around the cost of keeping you in temporary accommodation compared to how likely it is they are to find you social housing. It is very, very rare. There's normally very extenuating circumstances, and it could be cross-borough deals around generally domestic abuse of some sort. So you do have some London boroughs that do have deals that if you've got to flee an area for domestic abuse, then another borough will pick you up if they've got that agreement. But that's only for social housing rather than a homelessness application.
Well, that's right. I remember I was on the street the last time, 8 years ago now, 9 years. I bumped into a woman at a church meal, and she told me she was fleeing domestic abuse. She come to London to get out, But who is responsible for all this chaos?
What do you mean by chaos?
Well, what's happening now? That people being shoved out. And remember, we're coming up to Christmas. Okay, the weather's beautiful at the moment. Look out my window, it's sunny. I could really, I will admit, in all the years I was on the street, it was only about two and a half years total, 2 years total maybe. There's only, I don't mind the rain, we're England. But I would say, be uncomfortable. I only had one night of uncomfortable. I had a good sleeping bag. But these guys might not have anything they get out.
It's so the situation at the moment, it's a decision made by and run by the Home Office. It's got nothing to do with local authorities. It is purely a Home Office decision. My personal opinion on this is that it's a Home Office decision based on mass politics and the need to try and draw in right-wing voters on the next election. That within the media, there is a huge, huge hatred for refugees, asylum seekers, and the government has made so many promises to, I hate the phrase, stop the small boats and empty the hotels, but it's a situation of their own creation. that they've used the media to actually lambast and pour hate onto these people seeking a better future, and it's come back and bit them on the backside. So the choice of using hotels was down to COVID, but that was the choice of using hotels down to COVID was because the accommodation that they were placing people in before was absolutely disgusting. That if you tried using this accommodation for local authority housing, if you tried using it for temporary accommodation or housing homeless people, it would get shut down. So it used to be ran by NAS, National Asylum Service. Oh, I was take out the NAS bit. So it used to be run by NAS, and you would find like a empty hotel. So like at Swiss Cottage, that was completely unfit for purpose as a hotel. They'd offered it to the local authority. The local authority had said, no, it's not up to law. It's not up to code. The fire regulations wasn't correct. It wasn't safe. They wouldn't place people in there in an emergency, but the asylum service did place people in there because they didn't really follow the same sort of laws. And so you'd have people from different countries, from different households that'd be sharing rooms. You would get placed in there on a Friday, have a roommate, and then Sunday the roommate would be gone, you'd get someone else, and then you'd be gone as someone else replaced. So you had this throughput of people that no one knew each other. It was a hotbed for disease. So if someone got a cold, the whole place got a cold, and that would stay around for months because you was just moving people in and out. And this accommodation was absolutely filthy. I've been in a few of them, and it was completely disgusting. I've been in squats in condemned houses that are actually much better. And so the use of hotels, even though it's been widely hated, was far better for people's mental health. A lot of the hotels, most of the hotels that are used, the owners actually contacted the Home Office and put them forward for use. So the hotels were pretty much empty. If you look at some of them that were being used and are still being used, they were very, very low occupancy for the majority of the year. And they were only full occupancy for once or twice a year, sometimes 3 times a year. And so what they found was that by offering out to the Home Office, they would say, we've got 300 rooms. You can have each room for £80 a night, but you pay for every single room, no matter how many are empty. And so these bills are just going through the roof. There could be like 20, 30% occupancy sometimes in them. And it's the hotel owners that are actually raking in the cash. It's not local authorities. It's not anyone else. And so when you get a hotel that's opened up for asylum seekers in an area, it's pretty much hated on Facebook groups. It's hated on local media. It's pretty much hated by locals because it's all drummed up by the press. And it's the hotel owner, no one's doing it.
Well, I was in temporary accommodation last year. When I came out of hospital, as you know, I went into a nice care place. Then, and I'll talk about that on January the 1st, my story. I was put into a place I called the Tip.
Yes, I remember you talking about it.
Remember I said, I'll tell you later what it was. I was on the first floor. I have trouble with mobility. I really struggled getting up those stairs, but I had no choice. When I got into the room, it was a double bed where it should have a single bed. There's no room to walk around in. The blind had a tear in it, but you can open the window. So there's a fire. I was dead. And as we've discussed before, Ross, homelessness is a business for some people.
Yes.
And the amount of money nowadays, I think it's £1.7 billion have been dished out on temporary homeless. So we can include the people that you're talking about in that bill.
No.
No?
Comes out of a different pot.
Where's it come out of then?
Comes out of, I believe it's the immigration department, but it comes out of the Home Office.
Well, I spoke to
the accommodation that you're describing and how unfit for purpose it was, that was passed by local authorities saying that was acceptable for some temporary accommodation. If you remember, local authorities would have turned down the NAS accommodation as being unfit for purpose. So that place, the Tip, was unfit for you and you know it. But a council passed that, but they passed out they turned around and said the NAS stuff was not suitable for them. That is how bad that accommodation was.
Well, then I dread to visit one of these NAS hotels. I will try. What I did say to Ross before, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to be writing to the immigration office for their comments to add on to this particular podcast, because something else that normally you don't. A lot of my work is dealing with press officers, unfortunately, and press officers aren't interested. They give you the clean version all the time. Well, I asked the question, I've never got the answer. I've even gone further and got the answer. But I'll see who else might get an answer on this. What would be the ideal solution, Ross?
The ideal solution, the ideal one would be 56 days notice that someone needs to leave.
Yeah.
It would be services put in place by the Home Office to try and integrate asylum seekers into the local community far better than they're actually doing. And it would be offering support to help them try and find private rented accommodation. So the social housing exit is never going to happen. But what we've seen in the hotels, and I've worked with people that work quite heavily with them, is that when people are in hotels, they're in this sterile environment that they have their food brought to them, they can access food. So in the days of COVID, food was taken to their room, but quite often now they can go down into the hotel, what would have been restaurants, canteens and stuff like that. That would have been how they get their food, their breakfast, their lunch, their dinner. They've got access to teas, coffees, etc. on site. So they're not actually seeing British culture. They're not being integrated within the local community. And what you find is that anywhere that you've got a closed environment, rumour rules, number one. And so people talk amongst themselves about what they're going to do in the future, how they're going to live. And so what you start seeing is that the asylum seekers, now refugees, is they're under this misbelief that they're going to get social housing, and they're under the misbelief they're going to get social housing and that the work that they will get will pay for their housing. Whereas, it's right, cough away and I'll start again.
Sorry, carry on.
Okay, good. Keep it quiet though. So they're under this misbelief that the work they do would pay for their housing. And so they leave with all these dreams of, I'm going to get accommodation, I'm going to get a job, everything's going to be great. And then they're suddenly hit with, oh, by the way, your rent is going to be 3/4, 4/5 of how much your wages are going to be. And so they've been living in this false world for 6 months, a year, 18 months, 2 years, sometimes 3 years, where they don't actually understand what's happening out there because they're being kept in this closed environment. What I would ideally like to see happen is never going to happen. So I have to scale back what I think to a reality, which is the best that we can hope for is 28 days. And people from the Home Office being employed to actually talk through, this is what living in Britain is going to be. This is the reality of it. This is what you're going to get. So people, oh, sorry.
Let's say, you might remember I was part of but Matt mentioned it on the Monday when he came, Matt Downey. That was part of the planning group for the Croydon Skylight. And we went to a organisation. They had their open day there, where they had their residents and the people. And it's the unreality that they're scared to say. Some young girl stopped and said, why can't I get a council flat? And I would have said, unfortunately, there is not enough council flats in the world. The guy just turned around and said, I'll look into it, because he was scared to approach the problem. So what you're saying is these people are scared to approach the problem who are working with them. They don't tell them reality, they let them have fantasy.
There's no people there to tell them that it's an unrealistic expectation. Yeah. So most of the contacts they have are either with hotel staff who haven't got a clue about any of this, Volunteers from refugee services, who again, they're specialised in asylum cases, they're specialised in refugees. Their whole setup is around trying to support people in their asylum claim. They're not trained in housing, they're not trained in benefit claims, they're not trained in the things that they need for afterwards, which is quite right, because otherwise you're going to have a volunteer service that has to be so highly trained and no one's going to pay for it.
Well, but hold on a minute. I'm going to disagree with you totally. All right? I'm a trainer by nature. That's what I used to do, mainly on teaching. But also I set up this course at a young hostel thing. I'm preparing to go out and what I thought I would like to know, where the shops are, how easy to travel, what's the place like, that sort of thing. Right.
Yep.
Most of those rents were going to be paid on housing benefit. I knew they would get that. And I explained what housing benefit was. And the limitations, as we know, housing benefit has been frozen. Like we're here on the 22nd. I'm recording this before the 22nd. Of if housing benefit be unfrozen. Matt Downey put a post up on it saying today he's hoping housing benefit's been frozen, as you know, since 2020. He put it's going to be it needs a 30% increase to reduce the homeless stuff. I can't see it being that way, unfortunately, from my knowledge of how they treat when they unfreeze benefits. But surely at least these people, they don't have to be trained in housing benefit. Tell them the reality instead of letting them have a fantasy.
So, as a sort of rebuttal about that, housing benefit in how it's being described just there does not exist. What you're talking about is LHA, local housing allowance.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Which is
housing benefit,
isn't it?
Housing benefit generally only relates, apart from in a few small cases, to supported housing benefit, which is distributed by the local authority. The vast majority of housing costs are paid by Universal Credit Housing Element, and it's tied to the LHA. And when you go to services and then you have to explain to them what LHA is, it shows that the level of need of training in a lot of services that support people is still really needed. So if you're looking at something like asylum support, the level of training needed for asylum support is through the roof. To then add on how to properly negotiate how to properly navigate the housing system, which is really intricate, including LHA and how to do all this stuff, it's a level of training that a full-time worker from a specialised service would need. So I know a lot about Universal Credit. I know part of Universal Credit to the nth degree, but overall of Universal Credit, that is such a tiny, tiny amount of it that you take me outside of the variants that I need to know for work, I haven't got a clue. For single homeless people, single people living in supported accommodation, I know it. But as soon as you add a child or a partner onto it, I haven't got a clue. So when we're expecting... Oh, sorry, go on.
I'd say, look, when it came out, because I was writing for the magazine, I've come back to write for this magazine. It's called The Pavement. It's for homeless people. I used to write about Universal. I've written reams, pages on Universal Credit, explaining it to the homeless people there, what it is, what you got to do, and all those sort of things. I think if you look at it as, I'm saying these people don't have to say word for word what Universal Credit is. They say, look, part of it's for your living, and even then it's below living, I in my opinion, part of it's towards your housing. What I never understood, I'll tell you what you probably do know, is Universal. In the old days, when you had job seekers, you went in and filled a form in the job centre, and that was it. No. Universal Credit was brought in, as we know, to bring it all under one umbrella, several other benefits, several other things, tax credits were put under it, child tax credits. But for housing, you'd think it'd be the same way. No, you've got to apply to the housing authority, which I don't agree with, because in the end, the money's coming from them. It's coming from that one pot, as far as I'm concerned. But that's what they need. They need to know there are rates in certain areas, and they can find that out quite easily. To realise, because most of them are going to go on a housing benefit, aren't they?
Local housing allowance, yes.
Yeah, so that's all they need to know, and that's the reality. It's not like I tell you where I'd like to live. I'd love to live up the West End. Now here, I'm in an old age home, so I was surprised. You know how much it is. It's not that much really. I pay 200 quid a month, 150 quid a month service charge. But I know about it, but also I'm interested in it. I write about it. I try to understand things like this. So that's all I say a worker would need to know, just the basics.
Universal credit changes every April, every October. Twice a year there's updated. And so when universal credit came out, Generation 1, it was never designed to be the final product. Even by Generation 20, which is when I got really interested in it, it wasn't even close to being the final product. And one of the things that about universal credit that is very maligned, one of the things about universal credit, which is not understood, is that by the time the papers got hold of a story, universal credit's probably changed 3 or 4 times by then. And so the situation that person was in is unlikely to be hit, So the situation that person that's being written about was in, has probably been negated by updated rules by then. Now, that's not to say that every single person under that's not to say universal credit is a good thing. It's to say that it's an ever-changing thing, which was one of the few things that job seekers could ever be accused of, was that it very rarely changed. It was a beast that stayed the same, and it never moved with the person.
Well, I don't know if I ever mentioned to you this. I was writing another piece about universal credit. It became almost the magazine at that time was coming every month. Every month something changed in universal credit, so I'll inform people. And I saw an article while I'm doing some research. This landlord was refusing people from universal credit. So I phoned the National Association of Landlords. And I said, is it just one landlord, doesn't he? She told me it's all their landlords at that stage, but it did have bad publicity about how the money went out.
I know exactly when that was, and I know exactly what the situation was, because at that time, to get direct payments, APAs, alternative payment arrangements, to get APA set up for payments to be made directly to the landlord for the housing element, someone had to be in at least 3 months' worth of rent arrears. So the private landlords weren't accepting those people. It took about a year of work to get done, and they experimented it first off on social landlords, RSLs, registered social landlords, direct payments. And I can't remember the exact name of it. It might have been an SS85 form. It was a matrix attached to it. And it then got extended out to private landlords, but the private landlords, it had to be done by paper. It couldn't be done online because Universal Credit was still experimenting with a computer program at that point. And I remember me and you, we were in an expert panel meeting when the Universal Credit people came down from Northumberland. Yeah. And it was 6 months after that it was actually extended out that any landlord whatsoever, private rented or social hand landlord, could take direct payments if they were working with someone who was on this matrix of needs. And one of those needs was if you'd been homeless or living in supported accommodation at any point in the last 12 months. And I've got a feeling that was around 5 or 6 years ago now. And so in that time, it has developed that much that it's got rid of that system.
But
so
don't you remember in that one, I turned around, they were showing us the initial pages that a claimant would look at. And I said, as a computer teacher, what about people who can't read English? And I suggested, you may remember the video. It's more friendly looking at a video, even that's a recording. Oh no, that's not needed. And I know there was somebody in where I lived in South London who said, and he was on ESA, he said, put me in university credits, get me on a computer, I'll throw the computer through the window. You know.
But on the flip side to that, if you look at the old system, it was paper.
Yeah.
How many people couldn't read or write? And so whatever system there is, it's never going to be perfect for everyone. And I feel like an apologist here for the DWP, and I really don't want to sound like it. But it's if someone's got an issue with computers, what did people with issues with reading and writing do before?
Well, I know
they got help. And so within, say, like Streatham Job Centre, I know that one very well, Streatham. On a Tuesday and a Thursday, they had a local group come in who would help you with the computer side and computer system. So if someone went to their first appointment or someone went in saying they want to claim it, they would get directed to that person.
Well, there was two things about that. I asked the press office what about somebody who can't use computers, and they did. Every question was this answer: they'd be redirected somewhere.
Yeah,
I remember being in London Bridge Job Centre when I was unemployed. There were 50 people in this room with me, and they said, "Who can use the computer?" Of course, I put my hand up. So I used to teach. I used to teach it for years. So, and only 3 people put their hands up. I'm wondering if somebody there, and young people, I was surprised, didn't. But we're going off the subject, and I think this is.
That is a very weird. We have gone very off the subject. This is like almost doing 2 in 1.
But we're coming towards the end, Ross. All right. And what I'm going to say to you, I'm going to write to the Home Office. I put an addendum to this broadcast. What would be okay? You are mainly work. I know that at Christmas time, last Christmas, you told me how crisis was.
Yes,
how good it was. I mentioned it to Matt actually, and I know it's going to be the same this year. Would you expect? I'm going to say, how many people will be migrants that come to you at crisis? Would you say, or have they come to you? It might have been already. Okay.
So the process for getting into crisis at Christmas is the same as it was last year. That people need to be nominated by certain services to get into the hotel. So one of the big issues that we used to have at crisis a lot we'd have, I would say, about 5% of the people presenting at the day centres to get in would have alternative accommodation. There was a gentleman who was famous for many years that he had a house in Ireland. He would come over to Holyhead, sleep at the station overnight, and then present the next day to get into crisis at Christmas. And we would be turning people away on the last day of entry that were genuine rough sleepers because there were rooms that were taken up by people that were in accommodation only. Part of the access route through services now is local authority commissioned outreach teams. So what it relies on is newly made refugees being found by outreach teams and nominated for places. So it's near impossible to even guess at a figure.
I know one thing I'll mention to you. I used to be a lead ambassador for crisis.
Yes.
I was mainly in the few years I was in Kingsway. One year they put me in Paddington. So I was in charge of the other ambassadors. So I'd give a talk to the volunteers.
I'm surprised I never met you there because I used to be at Paddington quite a bit. I was tucked away in outreach advice.
Well, funny enough, I'm going to tell this story. And this, because I know how good you are, and you're one of my experts I go to when I ask questions. I gave the talk, I said what I was. You know, mainly I was writing for the magazine, and also I taught a day centre. One day, and I think this guy, I'm going to say, really liked the person who couldn't speak English. He was on the translator. Just comes up to me and says, "Oh, they're sent him to this place." It was one of the Sisters of Mercy places, you know.
Yes, I know it.
And I thought, hold on a minute, they're always full. Why send him there? So I phoned up. He was going to be sent to the women's shelter. And I phoned up. They told me, no, we're full up in both places. Yeah, he comes here, he's sent. And I think sometimes, and actually I was asked a few times by the advice workers there what they should do. Now it's different now. I know they're tightened it up. You were telling me last year.
So I could probably answer that, what happened to that person, very well, in as much as anyone that was directed towards the sisters, it was because they had no recourse to public funds in the UK and couldn't access anything whatsoever. So their option, and they would have been explained this through the translator, was this is the only accommodation provider in London at that time that helped people with NRPF.
Yeah.
And it would have been explained to them that the only way to get in, and they're nearly always full, is to present there every day, phone up every day and talk to them. And when a bed space comes up, if they're lucky, they will get in. But the problem with that place, actually, no, it's their place to do what they want, is you could only stay there for 3 months. So you had 3 months to try and regulate your stay in the UK or work with services to return back to your home country. And so the sisters was always given as a last resort, but it was always explained that it's near impossible to get into, but no one else will take you.
Yeah, I only heard about it through another guy on the streets. I didn't know. All I knew was how fully the sisters run 2 places. I didn't know it's for men and women at the time.
So West London one. Yeah. There's one in West London which is for women only, and I think that had 6 bed spaces. And there's a men's one by the Imperial War Museum in South London. I think it's got 25 to 30 places, but it's very much run as an old school night shelter where you need to leave in the day, return in the evening.
7:30 out in the morning, yeah. Because we could talk about loads of things. We are digressing a little bit, but we are talking about.
I digress easy.
I don't tell you, I'm an expert digresser, as you know.
Experts by digression.
I'm very into, Ross knows this, I'm into the spoken voice. That's why the guest show, it's all people, most people are Matt. Matt will speak because Matt Downey's passionate about homelessness. I've known him for years. And people I get, but most of my guests are lived experience. Actually, I've got Shannon, who you know.
Yeah.
I've also come and talk about temporary accommodation. And Mike is going to talk about, he started to talk about gatekeeping, we've got into legal housing law. So it's great people I've got.
For anyone interested in gatekeeping and what that is, they Just Us, who Mike works for and Shannon works for, they've got a event on the 23rd of November in the evening. I'm sure he'll be able to my link.
It's now under house HBP. I think Mike's separated. It's just Shannon and Mike doing it. I'm going to.
Oh.
Yeah, you didn't know that.
I have got a fanboy moment though.
Sorry?
So I've got a fanboy moment because Giles Peaker, who's one of the best housing lawyers in the country, he's going to be speaking there. He's got a website that's a blog, really. It's called Nearly Legal, and it's got all the updated new cases going through court. Absolutely brilliant resource.
And Marnie's going to be there as well. She's talking.
Oh, good.
And Marnie used to be on the same panel as myself and Ross through an organisation you've now heard of several times, Expert Link, run by a brilliant guy called David Ford. He's going to send me money for keeping repeating it. When I'm going to go another aside, ladies and gentlemen, I'll tell you a bit of history. When lockdown came, I thought my world had ended. I had nothing to do, and I got a phone call from David. would I like to be on the panel talking, a national advisory panel, talking about homelessness as a government? And I will admit, David knows loads of people. I thought he'd phoned millions of people, and I was like the last person at desperation. But I now hear he only phoned 30. And he did Ross as well, but we can't always be perfect. That's how I first met him.
That panel kept me absolutely sane and together during lockdown. That really did. It gave me it gave me self-worth that my skills could still be used when everything else was shut down. It was just absolutely brilliant. Well, and it ended at It ended at the right time. It could have dragged on and it could have been useless, but quite rightly, Expert Link turned around and said, right, what do we do with this panel? How can we make this better? And they split it off into different groups to do specific roles. And I think that was the best way to end it.
Yeah, I'm the one that's still dealing with the housing ministry, and another one he created dealing with DWP, how they deal with the homeless. So you should look up their website. I'll probably put a link down there somewhere. I hope to get David on eventually to talk about it, because David is one incredible. I believe in people. But when David does his training, he talks about people you wouldn't like to meet, and he always says they're fantastic. And they are. But it's not a sort of person, I think you'd agree with that, right? He's got a great attitude.
And a great camper van.
Yeah, I know. We still haven't had that meeting in the camper van, have we? That he said, we're going to go somewhere and meet in the camper van. But the last meeting when Ross says we went to the curry place, remember that?
Yep.
Yeah, we had a curry. Very nice. And there's several. Marnie comes from up north somewhere. I can't think where, but there's a guy called Ryan who worked in Leeds. He was great, and it's interesting to hear, because I'm passionate about ending homelessness. I'm not like Matt Downey would say. Crisis thing is to end homelessness. I can't say ending, but to be aware of it. Yeah. But thank you very much, Ross.
No, that's cool, Ian. Anytime, mate.
Well, you are coming back. You ain't got a choice, mate, because I've got things that I want to talk to you about. And here,
just realised.
So that's it. And funny enough, I'm now recording this on Tuesday night to get it together. Well, not recording it, I'm putting it all together in a package. I did speak to the Home Office, and they said to me, saying about 28 days again. They have 28 days from the moment they get their permission to stay in the country. They then informed me that do that, the Department of Levelling Up, Housing and whatever, the titles are so long, are helping people to get accommodation. So on Monday, because I've been busy with loads of things, on Monday I contacted them. I was then asked to send them an email with my questions, and I put a few questions down, and I gave them till 6 o'clock this evening. Now normally, in the past, 9 times out of 10, press officers are brilliant. They know deadlines. They know we face the deadlines well. I did send a link to the podcast when I thought it was nobody. I got no answer. If I do get an answer, I will inform you, probably in the news programme or maybe at the beginning of another Real Lives. I was going to be doing. I met somebody on yesterday who claimed I was looking at an economist. He said he was an economist. He wasn't. I think he calls himself a humane economist. But he's very interesting, very knowledgeable. I really enjoyed the discussion. I usually enjoy learning about many things. And I have a good head for figures. So next week I'll have him. And if I do hear about it before then, I'll include that to that recording. So I'm afraid slightly longer, but I hope you enjoyed it. And once again, you can email me at my email, Ian Cowman, India Alpha November, Kilo Alpha Lima, Mike Alpha November at my personal email, gmx, George Michael X-ray, gmx.com.